Welcome to the Catalyst Sale Podcast. Whether you are a sales professional, not in sales, but interested in helping people solve problems, or a founder CEO who's looking to grow your business, you'll find practical tools, stories, and experience you can apply to your role. This is Mike Simmons. I'm the founder of Catalyst Sale. I'm excited to have Scott Ingram, host of Sales Success Stories and Daily Sales Tips, author of Sales Success Stories and B2B Sales Mentors, and host of the Sales Success Summit, and significantly better at branding than I am. Scott, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, Mike. Great to be with you again.
I think it's awesome that you've got everything is just so brand aligned. So this is really cool. So before we hit record, we started talking about hiccups. Not that either of us had hiccups, but what is your hiccup success or overcoming hiccup technique?
Yeah. So my strategy is mostly about holding your breath for as long as you can, but I enhance that effect by additionally taking sips of air and sort of forcing additional air into your lungs. All of that totally confuses hiccups. They just go away.
So I'm going to give you a better approach that will not require as much thought. Hopefully we're going to simplify the hiccup challenge. Fill up a cup of water, 8 ounces, 12 ounces, whatever, cup of water. Take a pencil and put it in your mouth. So the pencil, don't stab yourself with the pencil. Put the pencil horizontally in your mouth, kind of like a bit. If you're thinking of if you were riding a horse, and I don't know much about riding horses, so there you go. I think that
the horse has the bit, not you, right?
The horse has the bit, not you. But in this case, you're going to take the bit, which is going to be a pencil. You're going to put it in your mouth, and then you're going to drink that cup of water. You're basically going to chug the cup of water. As you go through that cup of water, it's basically going to force you to hold your breath through that period of time, and it will get rid of your hiccups every time.
Well, I'm going to try that next time, but mine doesn't require all this extra paraphernalia. I don't have to go get water and a pencil, and by that time, my hiccups are probably gone anyway.
Results. So it's matter.
All right, I'll try
yours,
yours, and you got to try mine, and we'll report back and see who doesn't have hiccups next time.
I will do it. And then there's another person. I can't remember where I heard this, but this will kind of dovetail well into our discussion. But someone had said you take a spoonful of sugar. And I know that's not the Mary Poppins spoonful of sugar, medicine go down and all that kind of stuff. But you just take a spoonful of sugar, and I guess that is a good way to get rid of hiccups as well.
And cause diabetes. Awesome.
What is it?
And cause diabetes.
And cause diabetes at the same time. So yeah, that is not keto friendly. It is not keto friendly. So Scott, it's been a while. You are a two-time guest now on the podcast, and thanks for being able to join. One of the things that we had talked about that was kind of the catalyst for this discussion was the importance of building a network and leveraging that network and learning from that network and building out these communities. And I know you and a friend of ours, Jeff Bajorek, and a couple of other folks get involved in different a different Slack channel and have some communication that goes on beyond the Slack channel. Why is it important to surround yourself with really good people?
Yeah, so many reasons. Yeah, I think it ultimately comes down to if the answer to everything isn't 42, it's surround yourself with great people. Because, the beauty is if you have a good network and you've got great people, right? This isn't just like random people, but I think, really smart people. That's why I keep talking to you, Mike, is you've got outlets for different areas of your life, right? So obviously my primary focus, just because it's my day-to-day life, is sales, right? So I want to have a lot of people who are great at sales, but sales is so multifaceted and broad. I might have different outlets that I go to depending on what the particular challenge is that I'm facing. And then, I want to have really great parents in my network, and I want to have really great fit athlete type people in my life, just so that I've got a place to go. And when I'm trying to challenge myself and trying to better myself in some area of my life, I know somebody that's great at that thing.
It's so important to shift perspective, to overcome blind spots. And that's a theme that we talk about on this podcast periodically. And that's one of the themes that I'm hearing is you're describing that. If I have a group of experts who are really good at something, then they can help me accelerate the path to success in that area of something. I can learn from them pretty quickly. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. And not just learn, but oftentimes they're also going to have a great network of great people, right? So you benefit from the introductions and the referrals and things that come about from that perspective as well. And then, I think there's a couple of different ways you can leverage that, right? I think the most common manifestation is I'm just going to give you a call and we're going to talk for a few minutes because I'm working through a particular challenge, or I've got a question, or there's something I think you might be able to help me with. But other times, I'm going to borrow your catalyst word. I think we can serve as catalysts in bringing some of those groups of people together, right? So whether it's a Zoom call where we've brought folks together, or it's an event where we're bringing people together, the themes that come out of those conversations, right? Maybe I don't have a question, but just hearing the questions of others and hearing how they're guiding each other and sharing those experiences provide just a massive opportunity to grow. And it's almost an opportunity to hear the questions that you didn't even know to ask, but somebody smarter than you thought to ask it.
Yeah, it's amazing how many times that just happens. Like we all have our own biases. We all have our own perspective. We all have our own set of experiences. And the more that we can leverage others or learn from others, and maybe it's wrong to use the word leverage, but I do think that's what it is. I think you're leveraging experience, the experience of others. The faster we can accomplish the challenges we're faced. And for me, one of the things I realized in it is I'm not the only one who's dealing with some of this stuff.
Oh, for sure. Well, you know what? I think leverage is a perfectly fine word, because if you think about the other end of it, right? If you've really applied yourself to something and become expert at something, isn't it like really gratifying when somebody reaches out to you and wants to tap into that expertise, right? It really creates an opportunity for you to give. So that feels good in the first place. And then, frankly, you get even better, because I think taking the time to process some of that expertise that may just be sort of innate. It's not something it's one of those unconscious competence type of things. Like, well, I just do this. I don't have to think about it. But then to have to process it and think about it and then articulate that to someone else helps you take your own game to the next level as well.
Definitely. And it creates an opportunity for you to reflect on your own personal experiences, which creates this path for you to start to say, hey, am I actually improving, or am I able to look at something a little bit differently? Am I able to, and I keep going back to perspective, but am I able to shift my perspective and start to consider the challenge that is in front of me from a different view, rather than getting so laser focused? And we can do this. We can get so laser focused where we put these blinders on, going back to the horse, we put these blinders on, they help keep us moving down a specific path. And before you know it, you're in a rut. And before you know it, that rut gets deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And then you don't see a way out. So being able to lean on others who either have similar experiences or have slightly different experiences can be a great way to see those ruts before they become too deep.
Well, and I think it goes one step beyond that too. It's if these are people that you keep close to you, you're not only tapping that knowledge and experience and that broader perspective that they have, but hopefully you've got enough relationship there that they have some perspective on you, right? And they're sort of able to think about why you might be thinking about the way you're thinking about it, right? Sort of understand how you got into that rut. Like, okay, that makes sense, but let's think about it this other way, right? Because I think this absolutely applies particularly to sales leadership and sales management, sort of the sales coaching that happens. Because I think I'm going to way oversimplify things, but let's just say that there's two types of sales leaders, right? There's the do what I say, and there's the let's figure this out. Right. In my opinion, the do what I say are basically useless, right? Because, maybe there's some value there, and maybe really early in your career, that way might work. But as you become more seasoned and as you step into your own style and your own approach and you get comfortable with that, my doing your approach exactly the way you're describing it probably isn't going to fit me and my way. So what really works then is the let's figure it out. And really what I hope that you're doing as a great sales manager is just asking me the questions to get me to think through and find the answer myself, right? You don't even have to tell me what the answer is. I may or may not get to the same answer that you had in mind, but it's that challenging process and just getting each other to think about, how would I apply this given my knowledge and my experience and my style that's really going to fit this? Because I see a lot of people just kind of run up against a wall. there's so much expertise out there, right? But if you just try and take it the way it is and just run with it, but if it doesn't fit you, it's not going to work.
Yeah, and I like the focus on questions, because the questions are the thing that provoke thought, and that thought can start to create a higher level of engagement. I mean, how many times have you been in a room where someone's just preaching something to you, just pushing their own agenda on you or passing information along? And when you walk out of that room, how much are you really thinking about the thing that they were delivering versus maybe what you're going to have for dinner later on that night, or the other challenges that you've got in your life? So as a sales manager, as a leader that's out there who is listening to this and is working with your team, if you find that you're spending more time talking at your team than asking questions and getting them engaged, you may need to check yourself. Think about the coaching that you provide to them when they're out there with clients. Do you want them preaching to clients, or do you want them asking clients questions and gathering information? And if you want them doing that, what makes you significantly different in your role?
Totally. And I think it ultimately comes down to ownership, right? So if you ask me questions and I come up with the answer, I own the answer. You don't own my answer, right? And that's what we should, to your point, that's exactly what we should be applying to our sales process, right? You want to sort of lead the conversation and help them find their own answers and their own solutions. Hopefully that the answer is you. But now they have ownership of, hey, that was my idea. I believe that this is going to work, rather than, hey, I'm some smart ass sales guy. I just told you that's what you need to do and what's going to happen. I think your results are probably going to be a little bit different depending on those two approaches.
Yeah. So let's say that I'm an early career sales rep, and I'm going through the motions where I've got the person who's passing on the edict, and I've been doing that enough. Let's say I've done it for 2 years, and I'm starting to see these same patterns kind of repeat themselves. How do I start building my own personal network? Where do I go what's this process that I should go through in order to start to identify the people that I'd want to connect with, or that I'd want to talk with, or that I'd want to engage with to help level up my capabilities?
Yeah, great question. So I can't talk anymore about anything networking without referencing my favorite sort of networking piece of content of all time. And once upon a time, I actually started an organization here in Austin called Network in Austin. So by virtue of that act, I became some sort of, like, people decided I was a networking guru. And so, when people decide that of you, you quickly decide, damn, I better ramp up and actually figure this out so I know what I'm talking about. And so, I've read, I can't tell you how many books about networking relationships and things like that. But particularly from a sales perspective, there was a Harvard Business Review article years ago. I don't even know how old it is at this point, but it's still just as relevant today as it was then. The title of the article is Better Sales Networks. And I reference this so often, if you go to top1.fm/HBR, it'll take you right to that particular article. And what it talks about is, as we think about sales networks, we tend to think about it from one dynamic, and that is kind of the quote unquote Rolodex angle, right? Like who are the people that I'm connected to that I should theoretically be able to call and get a meeting and sell to, right? Is kind of the way that we think of, that's what a sales network is.
Yep.
Well, that in this article, they talk about that being really only one of about 4 dimensions. And the other dimensions and the way that you need to be thinking about this network. So that one's obvious, right? If you're a seller, you need to be surrounding yourself and getting into the communities of your buyers, right? So if you're selling to financial professionals, well, go to freaking financial conferences and meetups and whatever else. Like, go where those people go. But you also need to be thinking about one of the other probably most important networks that you have is when you're selling something, you need to be able to kind of bring in the right expertise and the right resources from within your organization at varying parts of the sales cycle. And then obviously beyond, once you've closed that deal, you got to make sure it gets delivered. So you need to have the relationships with the delivery team as well. So, one of the just super simple things that you can do is every week have lunch or coffee with one new person in your organization outside of the sales team. Right? Go talk to somebody in my marketing, go talk to somebody in finance, go talk to somebody in product, go talk to somebody in customer service, right? And by virtue of building those networks, you are going to be so much more valuable as a seller because you can pull on those people to solve tricky things or to kind of insert into that conversation like, hey, look, I don't know the answer to that, or our solution doesn't have that capability yet, but let me bring in the product person who owns that piece of the roadmap and have you talk to them and share that interest, and they can kind of let you know how likely it is that we would develop something like that, or get your input to help kind of inform the development of that solution, right? So that's one of those things. And then I think, I mean, obviously, if you're in sales, the next place you need to go is, and the way I always think about this is, go find the number one person on the team, right? Find the person or people who are performing and just spend time with them, right? Just get in their heads, understand what they're doing, understand how they're thinking. It's going to help you. You want to have that resource to be able to ask questions. And so develop that sort of mentoring relationship, but don't stop there. I think the other thing you need to do is look outside of your sales team and look to other sales professionals. And that's so much of what I've done with Sales Success Stories and the Summit and all of these things is, I only interview quota carrying individual contributors who are either number one, or I will settle for the top 1%. So if they're number 3 on a team of 500, okay, I'll take it, right? And I've learned so much from that. And again, to your points earlier, getting that different perspective from people who are in different industries and different spaces. And again, think about the type of sales you're in. When I was with ADP years ago, selling major accounts in a local Austin market, a lot of my network that I built was complementary sellers, right? So I wanted to know a banker. I wanted to know an HR attorney. I wanted to have all of these resources who were calling on the same customers that I was, who aren't competing with me, who are actually in a position where if they see the need that I solve, they can refer me, they can introduce me, they can give me insights. I mean, oh my gosh, you know how powerful it is to go talk to somebody who you're trying to sell a deal and they've already sold a deal to that company and can you let you in on their whole process and all the steps? How powerful is that? Right. So just all of those different things, I think you can think about. And again, this is a super long game. So you don't have to have this massive network tomorrow. I'm talking about find each one of those things and one lunch, one coffee a week in 2 or 3 different areas. So, just carve out time, make it a priority 2 or 3 times a week to have, a different session with each one of these individuals. Over the course of a year, you've got a solid network. I mean, that's a couple hundred people.
Yeah, it's amazing how that momentum can carry and how it will compound over time. I think one of the items that jumped out at me as you were going through that is the piece about building the network inside your organization and the power that can have, not only in the instances where you need some help and you can tap somebody on the shoulder and say, hey, so-and-so, I need some help with this. Can you help me out? But in some of the more proactive related items, where you get them engaged in conversations with your customers and the customers that you work with, they can ask questions that contextually just wouldn't make sense if you're the one who's asking them. And it's amazing how the customers, the ones you work with, the organizations you work with, will open up when someone from product is asking a given question, or someone from marketing is asking a given question, or someone from operations is asking a given question. The other thing that I really like about taking this approach is many times those organizations will make sure that they bring somebody else from their company to be able to support the discussion inside the organization. So maybe your person that you're working with who's your key contact in the organization isn't the most technical person. They may bring their technology person to the discussion to answer some of the questions that your technology person has. And what you're doing is you're improving the amount of information that's being transferred between each organization, and you're creating a deeper level of rapport and a deeper level of relationship between your company. It's not just about you and that one person. It's about a group of people who are working toward a common goal.
Well, and it's at the end of the day, it's credibility, right? Unfortunately, your business card, my business card, it says sales on it. And right out of the gate, we take a hit on like the trust and credibility level just because we're in sales. Like, of course, we're going to say things that, shine a good light on what we're trying to highlight. Bringing in those other individuals that don't have sales on their business card, they just have more credibility. And I think you just have to like recognize it and realize it is what it is and leverage it.
So why is sales a dirty word? Like, why does it create this connotation of, someone's going to try to convince me to do something I really don't want to do?
I think there's two factors there, right? There's a ton of stereotypes going on that are, what's the word here? That's another P word, perpetuated by the movie industry, right? There's any movie that talks about sales, like, fun to watch, entertaining, hopefully not the reality. Sadly, sometimes it is the reality. So that's one element. I think the other one is experience. We've had too many experiences with bad sellers who are all about themselves and are, care more about their commission than our results. And they've had that experience one too many times. And I mean, that's the thing that I love the most about all of the conversations that I've had with all of these top performers, is what you really start to see and realize is the very best care the very most about the results of their clients. Like the commission is just, that's what happens naturally when I serve somebody well. So they're the first ones to tell you, you know what, I don't think this is a fit, right? I based on what you've told me so far, doesn't seem like this is the right thing. They're the first ones to refer you to their quote unquote competition, right? Who might be able to better serve them. And because of that, they'll do business with that person 3 or 4 times in the future because they've built that level of trust. That's why they're at the top, right? And so again, it really goes back to the stereotypes and the things that have been pushed out there that are just wrong, that the very best salespeople do not do. But we still have to overcome that impression of the buyer, right, who has that belief. And we just have to prove ourselves every time, right? Because we don't get a pass because we do think that way, right? We've got to show it.
Yeah. And I think when you just think about the Sales Success Stories podcast and the folks that you've had on there and the folks that you have at the summit, where they're sharing practical experience, they're sharing their approach with others, they're sharing what works. And this becomes a great way for folks to start to see a signal through the noise and realize that, no, it's not about the 10 tips that'll help you get to close faster, or the 10 steps that help you do this, or the 3 things that you should do to do that. It's more about, we talk about it on the podcast, it's a thinking process, it's an engagement process, it's about supporting others, it's about helping people solve real problems. And if there's no problem, or if there's no problem on the customer side, or they don't perceive the problem as important enough to solve, don't waste your time trying to, quote unquote, convince them. So let's talk a bit about the summit that you have going on in Austin. What prompted the summit?
Really the same thing that prompted the podcast, right? So the podcast started because I've always been a student of sales, having been in sales, right? I read tons of books, I listen to all kinds of podcasts and things like that. But very little of the content is coming from real practitioners, right? Especially in the field, right? You're like, when was the last time you heard from a really great sales guy what he's or she is doing, right? And so that's really where I wanted to focus. I wanted to hear from, okay, this person sold. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've interviewed somebody who they're number 1 and they beat the number 2 person by a factor of 2 to 1, right? They're not just 200% a plan, like they're 200 times better than the next best guy who would have been number 1 if they weren't there, right? And so that I want to know, like, what are you doing? How are you thinking, right? What is your process? And so, that's where the podcast started. I mean, the podcast is great for me, right? I get to build relationships with these folks, but my audience doesn't. And just like we were talking about before, sort of being the catalyst to create community and put all of the right people in the room and just to learn from what do they talk about with each other, right? It's one thing for me to interview a top performer, but what does one top performer ask another top performer that I wouldn't ever even think about asking, right? So that is so much of what drove that. And then it was also just deep dive into some of these topics, right? Like my interview, like yours, I mean, we cover a lot of ground, we cover a lot of different things, But what if I could have the best of the best spend 30 minutes or 45 minutes presenting on the thing that they think they do best? Like, how freaking powerful would that be? So it's all of those things. And I keep it intentionally intimate, right? We'll have, I don't know, 185 people. Like the theater, and that's the other fun part of it. I've been to so many events in my life, and there's so many things I hate about traditional events. And I wanted to kind of squash all of them. And one of them is, I don't think I can handle, I mean, I'm going to have to, because it's just the way of the world. I don't want to go to another event in another hotel conference room that's just generic with the chairs all hooked up to each other. And you're like, you know what? So we do it in a movie theater. That's a full service movie theater. So there's literally a menu at your seat, and there are people who will bring you whatever you want. It's a full menu and a full bar all day long. And so it's that sort of experience that I wanted, and with all of these folks. And so what led me down that tangent was the largest auditorium we have available seats 198 people. And I have to give up the last row to the AV crew. So that's it, right? It's not multi-track. It's everybody having sort of this same shared experience. And then having space in the agenda. That's the other thing that drives me crazy about conferences, is we try and cram so much information in there. But the reason I went was to connect with the other people who were here and to build relationships. And there's not enough time to go do that. So we build a lot of that opportunity to connect and just digest the information and talk about the information and connect with the speakers in a really intentional way.
Yeah, one of my favorite parts about conferences, about the ones that I attend, are the conversations that happen in the margins, the things that happen in the hallway when you're walking between those rooms that have the chairs connected to each other, or as you get into an environment where people are able to congregate and interact with each other. It's not necessarily the speaker who's pontificating about something. Now, I enjoy it when a speaker will ask a question that provokes thought. Then again, I tend to be much more question oriented. That's kind of where my thinking goes. So as you think about curating this kind of list of people that come together in this event to share experiences and help elevate others, what are some of the core things that you look for in the speakers that you invite to speak?
Yeah, I think that the way that I'm approaching it this year is really thinking about the overall experience for each attendee and what they're going to want to take away, and presenting the information in sort of a logical way. Yep. So the way we're organizing it, it's a 2-day event. And the first day is basically going to follow the sales process, right? So we'll do a heavy dose of prospecting on the front end, right? Because everybody always wants to know, how do I execute that part of the process better, right? How do I get in the door? How do I create the opportunity so that I can actually run a sales process? If I don't have anybody to talk to, I don't have a sales process. And then from there, just kind of following the rest of the way. So we'll certainly talk about discovery. We'll certainly talk about building a business case and closing some of the gaps in that process. And we'll talk about close planning or joint action planning, so that, I think we spend a lot of time, we don't spend a lot of time talking about it. It's a really common question. Everybody wants to know, how do I close? You know what? If you're selling right and you're following a process, the close is just a really natural step that happens as you're working through this. It's not this end all be all. I have to use some magic combination of manipulative words to get you to sign a piece of paper. No, like, we're working through this together. And that's one step. And I think also the wrong way to think about this is, I actually don't like the word close, right? That indicates that that's the end.
Yeah.
Well, it's not. Like, to me, that's the real, true beginning of the relationship, right? That's the beginning of the lifetime value of that customer. And we need to be, as sales professionals, thoughtful about how do we pass along the information to the rest of the team that's now going to deliver everything that we promised, right? So it's incumbent upon me to make sure that that experience is great for the customer. Then they're not having to re-educate everybody on my team about all the things that they spent weeks or months talking to me about, right? And instead, like, that's on me. And again, if we do all of that correctly, they renew as a customer, they keep coming back, they keep giving us referrals and all of those things. So The last piece of that first day that we'll do is I've got a gentleman who was on the show that works for Oracle today who has closed 3 deals, each worth over $50 billion. And he's going to really dig into kind of that mega deal process of how do you manage super complex type of decisions like that. And then the second day is going to be really more focused on the individual. We're going to talk about mindset. We're going to talk about productivity and kind of the almost personal processes. And then we're going to talk about another thing that I don't think gets addressed very often. And that is, how do you manage your sales career? I didn't realize this was a term that I coined until I Googled it and came up with 141 results. If you say something that only has 141 results on Google, you invented it. So I consider myself an intentional individual contributor. And I think that that's an overlooked path in sales. But we'll also explore the more traditional path of kind of sales leadership from a panel of folks who have been on the podcast, who have been top performers and are now leading teams, and really getting inside their heads as newer sales leaders, just to understand, what do you wish you knew? What would you have done differently to prepare for this role, to be even more successful in this role? Because we all know, I know you know, it's a totally different animal from selling.
It is a totally different animal. And if the reason that you get into it is because you think you're going to be able to teach people how you sell, or you think there's some kind of great honor in being labeled as a leader, and it comes with all this other, great, what's the word, accoutrements or whatever, which is a word I should not be saying out loud, then you're in it for the wrong reason. Sales is a service-oriented business. Whether you are in a sales leadership role and you're serving, helping to enable, helping the people around you succeed, you're removing obstacles, reducing friction, helping them accelerate their path, or you're working with your customer and helping to connect the dots between a problem, whether it's known or unknown, and a solution, whether it's known or unknown. It all ends up being about the same thing, which is, how do you help people accomplish the thing they want to accomplish? Not how do you accomplish the thing that you want to accomplish?
Yeah, that's a great reminder, because as we're recording this interview, I am still actively kind of putting the details and filling all the slots and building that agenda. And it made me realize that there's probably also going to be a presentation on just servant leadership, because that's really what this is at the end of the day, right? If you look at sort of the definition and what servant leadership really is, and if you look at what the best performers really do, it's one and the same.
So I want to go back to the closing piece, because we talked a little bit about movies, and one of the big ones out there is the Alec Baldwin, Glenn Ross with Always Be Closing, and I like what Saturday Night Live did with that, with Always Be Cobbling, and then you get into ones like Tommy Boy, and I really enjoyed Tommy Boy because I've been in that environment where you're so excited about this little pet sale when he's petting the biscuit, and then all of a sudden you just tear it apart because you get so intense and engaged in it. But the thing I want to pick up on is this piece around the close. And there are a number of times this question will come up, and it depends on who's asking the question. If it's someone new new to their role in sales, I'm not going to be as much of a jerk as I am if it's someone who is further along down the path and is looking for some kind of trick or gimmick. But the question I usually follow up with is, how often do you like being closed? Like, when's the last time you were closed where you're like, wow, that absolutely felt awesome. It was the most exciting thing that's happened to me in, I don't know how long, but so if you don't want to be closed, what makes you think that your customer wants to be closed? And I agree with Scott. I wish we could get just rid of that word and just say that, that close, that activity is really just another gate in the process that we're going through relative to building an overall relationship in the journey that we're moving along. And it's just another data point for us to say, are we moving in the right direction, or are we moving in the wrong direction? So don't be out there focusing on new tricks and gimmicks on how you close. So Scott, as there's going to be some people out there who are thinking, wow, how do I learn more about this event and the Sales Success Summit? And if I want to attend, and does it make sense for a team to attend, where you get a group of people together? Where should people go?
Yeah, great set of questions. So the best place to go is top1summit.com with the number one, although I think if you spell it out, that'll get you there too. And, from a team perspective, I think it's important to know that I really built this very, very specifically for the quota carrying seller, right? It's not for the sales manager. It's not for the sales leader.
Yep.
Not to say that there won't be any sales leaders there, not to say that they won't take a ton of value away from it. It's just not built specifically for them. From a team perspective, I'm actually, you would think as a guy that's, quote unquote, selling this event, right? That I want to fill it up and make sure that, it's sold out. I do, but I'm much more focused on who's in the room, because the overall experience that everybody is going to have, especially with the amount of kind of built-in networking time, or call it the intentional hallway that we have designed into this meeting, that experience changes depending on the quality and caliber of people that I have in the room. So one of the things that I've been working with a number of different sales leaders on is we're actually doing Q3 contests to send their top performers to the summit. So this is a reward for the top people. Now, not to say that this is only for the very best of the top 1%, but what it is for is people who want to get there, right? Who really have that desire, or willing to make that investment. And so for those teams, there is a team package, so they can get 5 tickets for the price of 4. So, if you're a leader and you want to send 4 of your top people, that's a great way to manage it. And, they're welcome to just reach out to me and kind of talk through that. I've jumped on a couple of team meetings just to introduce the summit and get their teams excited about these events and about these contests. You can just reach out to me, Scott@top1.fm. We'll get you right there.
Awesome. I want to bring it back to where we started the conversation with this whole idea of kind of building out your network or building out your community with a level of diversity, and how that diversity impacts the perspective and the impact that an influence really that you can have, that you can gain from others. So as someone's going through this and they're thinking, there are a couple of folks on my team that I want to send, do you see people sending someone who's not in sales to the event? And would they get anything out of the event?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Last year at the very first event, there was a CEO there, right, who was just trying to gain a broader perspective of, he just didn't have a lot of sales experience, was in the process of starting to build his first sales team. And I think wanted to really immerse himself in what positive sales culture could really be. I think that it's certainly also relevant. I mean, I sell to marketers, and the divide between sales and marketing, it's not cliche, it's almost ubiquitous, and it drives me crazy. And I think there's basically just kind of a lack of empathy on both sides, right? I think, again, as you're building out that internal network, man, spend some freaking time with marketing, right? Talk to those people, let them know what you're seeing. One of the things I think marketing doesn't get enough of is just perspective from the field. And that's on us. Like, if we're not telling them what we're hearing and the questions people are asking and the challenges they're faced with, well, no wonder what they're producing is off base. They don't have any good inputs, right? And so I think from that perspective, man, sending marketing or product development or any of those folks, there's definitely value in there, again, from kind of the empathy perspective and understanding this is what the day-to-day and the real life of sales professionals. And again, not just seeing it on the stage in the presentations, but getting to have those conversations and just being able to sit in it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's insane to me how many times we forget. And I know a lot of this is KPI driven and the various metrics that we might evaluate inside our organization, but it's amazing how many times we forget, or how often we forget, that we're all wearing the same logo on our business cards. We all have the same domain in our email address. We all have the same logo on our golf shirts if we're wearing golf shirts, or if we're wearing t-shirts. Like, we're all part of the same organization. We should ultimately be moving toward the same general objective, which is solving a problem that exists in the marketplace. Again, whether it's known or unknown, with a solution that is either known or unknown. And depending on where you are in your continuum as an organization, your evolution as an organization, the problem may be known or unknown, or the solution may be known or unknown. And as you go through and answer those questions, you can start to determine how much influence marketing has on that aspect of the value chain, or how much sales owns of the value chain, but realize we're all in this thing together, and we can learn so much more from leveraging the expertise of others who've either gone down that path before or maybe have gone down that path before in a different context. And the thing that's interesting to me about going down the path before in a different context is when you hear those stories, you can start to think about how that applies in your business. How can you create innovation? How can you innovate inside your organization by leveraging the experience of others, the collective intelligence of others? Well, Scott, as we wrap things up, is there anything else that you'd like to share with those who are listening? And let's remind them where they can go to connect with you and where they can go to learn more about the summit that's coming up.
Yeah, I don't know that I have anything else specific to share. I mean, what I will say is, thanks for listening, right? Thanks for investing yourself and putting this kind of content in your head. I know Mike appreciates it. I hope that you're getting value from it. But, it's the more that you invest in your own development, I think the better, right? And if I can help you do that through the Sales Success Stories podcast or the Daily Sales Tips podcast, or if this summit is of interest to you, that's fantastic. And you can find out about all of those if you go to top1.fm. You'll find links to all of the above from there. So I don't have to give you a whole bunch of other instructions.
And I think one of the things I hope you see as you listen to all of the folks that have been on Scott's show or you participate in the event, there are no shortcuts here. The people who are successful work really hard in the right direction. They work hard on the things that count. They are not constantly iterating or changing their approach because somebody came up with some new quick fix or new shortcut. So don't get sucked into the snake oil that's out there on these with these quick fixes and shortcuts. And I'm getting redundant, but Scott, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I would just say, listening is great and learning is great, but you've got to put it into action. So I would say, pick one thing from this conversation. We've covered a lot of ground, but pick one thing and do it. And then let Mike and I know about it. We'd love to hear what you did.
Yeah, I want to know if it's the hiccup thing, if it's the building out your network, if it's getting other people involved in conversations, if it's rethinking the way that you're leading your sales team, or rethinking even just the idea of whether or not you want to move into a leadership role inside your organization, what it means to be a servant leader. Well, Scott, thanks for joining the podcast. That was an awesome discussion. We'll include all of the links in the show notes. If you've not picked up Sales Success Stories, please check it out. You'll be happy you did. If you know somebody who would benefit from hearing this discussion, please share it with them and let us know via Twitter or LinkedIn. I'd like to hear how you're applying the lessons learned and concepts discussed in your role today. Sales is a thinking process. How are you thinking differently about yours?